Hello and welcome to our last lesson in Key Question 2, Life During the Depression, of Depression War and Recovery, 1930 to 1951. We're going to be covering a few things today, but mostly we're going to be looking at the Special Areas Act. We're going to be looking at the response to the things that the government tried to implement to help people during the Depression. We're going to be looking at the Treforest Industrial Estate and how that helped, and a few other things relating to that as well. So obviously, if you look now, this is Dowlais in Merthyr Tydfil, and it's a huge, huge steel town, okay? But actually, 80% of the population left during the 1930s. And so they felt that they really had to do something, okay? King Edward VIII actually did a tour before it closed in 1936, and he said something must be done. There was a 73% unemployment rate when the steelworks closed, okay? So this is the kind of thing that the Welsh government was dealing with at the time, or the British government, sorry, there was no Welsh government at that point. So we're going to learn about the measures introduced by the government to tackle the depression. We're going to understand life in Britain during the 30s again, and we're going to think about some questions and answering some questions as well. So, attracting new industries. This is the first thing that they're trying to do. They try to attract new businesses to set themselves up in Wales. Now, in the 30s, if you remember doing this when we did the America module, there was a new consumer society, not just in America, it actually was all around the world. We had radios, fridges, cars, all that kind of thing. Hire purchase was a way of buying goods through credit, as you know. So you could buy things on tick and you could pay them off. So lots of people bought things like radios, cars, fridges, all these kinds of things on tick by way of hire purchase. The car industry, mass production meant cars could be produced really cheaply, really quickly, and car sales rose significantly in the 1930s. In the 1913, the number of cars sold had been 132,000, and this had risen to about 2 million in 1938. Electricity. The growth of these new industries meant that a new and efficient source of power was needed. It was cleaner, it was cheaper, it was much more efficient. It began to replace coal as the country's main fuel of supply. Now, you can imagine that had catastrophic results for Wales because the South Wales coalfield was its main source of income. So when we start not needing coal again, Wales gets into trouble, okay? So how did this impact on Britain? How did these things impact on Britain? It was hoped that these new light industries, now anything like this is called a light industry, anything that's sort of in a factory where you're not doing heavy work, physical work, like coal mining or steel works, they're heavy industries. Light industries are things like mass production, the electricity companies, the things like the Hoover factories, that kind of thing. It was hoped that these new light industries would help those who become unemployed as the traditional industries declined, but this wasn't actually the case. A lot of them needed skilled workers. It was really costly to train them, and the government weren't willing to pay for that. Even though they did have new jobs, they did create new jobs for people. They did not create half as much as they needed for the number of people that are actually unemployed. Many of these industries were smaller anyway, and they actually needed fewer workers anyway. And by 1930s, the sale of consumer goods only accounted for 15% of Britain's exports. So the consumer goods industry wasn't good enough to keep the economy going, and so these people didn't actually have jobs anyway. So it helped a little bit, but only a few people. So first things first, I want you to download the PowerPoint, go back through the slides, and I want you to answer these questions for me in your book, please, okay? In your book, on paper, on your laptop, on your device, however means you have, okay? So answer these questions for me. So I'm going to suggest that you pause the video and do that now. So hopefully you've done that, and now we're going to look at the Special Areas Act, okay? So I want you to write the title down, the Special Areas Act. So this passed in 1934 with the aim of attracting light industries into areas identified as particularly depressed, including South Wales. So attracting companies to come to these areas to set their stall, build their companies there so that we could have employment and more people moving in to these areas. It was a good idea, but in reality it was a very, very, very small impact. Only 12,000 additional jobs had been created by 1936, and the government was criticised for only offering it as a gesture, like sort of just to be seen that we're doing something to help, okay? Unemployment figure did drop a little bit, and it did actually start to drop significantly in the identified areas, but this actually was attributed to the migration of workers rather than the success of the Special Areas Act, meaning that the reason that the employment figure dropped is because so many people had left that there were enough people to fill the jobs that were left. If you remember from last lesson, we found out that actually 85% of people that left Wales in the 30s left South Wales. So there wasn't that many people there anyway. So the unemployment figure is tainted by the fact that so many people had left. Okay. And then we have the Treforest Industrial Estate. So if you could please put the title Treforest Industrial Estate. It was established in June 1936. It's a non-profit company whose aim was to provide some alternative forms of employment to the coal and steel industries, which had been hit hardest by the Depression. There was 3 small factories there in 1937, but they were employing 69 people. But actually, the investment happened, and between 1939 and 1945, it actually saw the number of people working on the industrial estate grow to 16,000. Now, there is a reason for this. I don't know if you clock the dates, but obviously this is during the Second World War, and during the Second World War we needed factories, munitions factories, clothing factories, all the food factories, all these kinds of things. And so the Second World War actually helped the Treforest industrial estate because there was more factories needed. So what I would like you to do is just make a spider diagram, please, of the Treforest industrial estate, pulling out key points from that. If you could pause the video and do that now, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you've done that. Now what I want you to do is answer the question, what was the Special Areas Act? And I want you to refer to the Treforest Industrial Estate. So a paragraph explaining to me what the Special Areas Act was and referring to the Treforest Industrial Estate. And again, I'm going to suggest you pause the video and do that now. Okay, so to finish off, we're going to look at the contrast of the older regions as regions of greater employment. So the 1930s is often remembered as a period of depression, but it was also a period when people in Britain were able to expand their experiences and improve their lives. The BBC gave people radio and television, and by 1939 there were 80,000 television sets in London alone. The number of people going on holidays increased immensely. Hotels and boarding houses, fish and chip shops, ice cream stands and fairgrounds and dance halls expanded. The holiday camps flourished, the most famous being Butlins in Skegness. So I want you to have a read through that, and I want you to write down some notes about what it tells us about the contrast between regions of greater employment. So hopefully you've done that, and what you've picked out is not all of Britain suffered, not all of Wales suffered. We had the BBC, we had radio and television, lots of television sets being sold at this point. People going on holiday increased a lot. Hotels and boarding houses and holiday destinations flourished. They had lots of money coming in because people were looking for an escapism as well during the Depression. They wanted to go somewhere nice, and they couldn't afford to go abroad. People didn't go abroad during this time, so the holiday resorts like Skegness, like Kidwelly, places up in North Wales and on the Llŷn Peninsula all actually profited from this time because they were holiday destinations and a lot of people went there. Okay. So how successful were the government measures to deal with the Depression? I want you to think of as many reasons as you can that they were a success on the one hand and as many as you can that they were a failure on the other hand. Okay, bullet points is fine, and once you've done that, we are done. Thank you very much.